With Russia bombarding Ukrainian cities and with evidence Putin's army is targeting civilians, there is tremendous desire to make the horror stop. And some policymakers are looking at China. Beijing has made early attempts to position itself as a peacemaker here, but the close relationship between Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Russian leader Vladimir Putin prompts questions about just how neutral China can be.
Once bitter rivals, China and Russia are now as close as frenemies can be. The start of the Winter Olympics in Beijing last month saw Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin declare a new era, a no-limits partnership, backing each other over standoffs on Ukraine and Taiwan, with a promise to collaborate more against the West. China likes to present itself as an honest broker in the conflict. But following the Russian invasion, Beijing has largely sided with its neighbour and close security partner, Russia. And rather than criticise Moscow, the Chinese government instead blames the US for causing the crisis. We hope all parties will work together with China to de-escalate tensions instead of adding fuel to the fire and promote a diplomatic solution. China will continue to play a constructive role in seeking and realising peace. Xi is a long-time admirer of Putin, and the two autocratic leaders have formed a strong bond. China denies that it knew about the invasion in advance and had asked Russia to wait until the Olympics were over before attacking Ukraine. While professing neutrality, Beijing's stance is geared more towards Moscow. China abstained on votes at the United Nations on sanctioning Russia and demanding the withdrawal of Russian troops. The Chinese refuse to acknowledge that Russia has invaded Ukraine. China is clearly watching the West's reaction to the invasion, especially when it comes to its own efforts to take control of self-ruled Taiwan. At the National People's Congress, China's annual rubber stamp parliament, Beijing hiked this year's defence spending by 7.1%. While the Ukraine crisis is putting pressure on China, Beijing's priorities lie closer to home with Taiwan.
Joining us in the studio is Clifford Coonan, who filed that report. Clifford, what qualifies China to be a peacemaker in all of this?
Well, on the surface, you would think it would be a good candidate. I mean, it's got good relations with both Ukraine and Russia, both countries where have China as their biggest trading partner before this, and they also have close relations between Xi and Putin. But as we've seen, maybe the relations are too close, and this is pretty much what disqualifies it as a peacemaker. It's more about, in some ways, what it's not doing than about what it's doing, because it's by not voting in favour of sanctioning Russia and by not taking part in the sanctions, there's a sort of it's basically enabling what Russia is doing, and by not calling it an invasion too. So there's a lot of reasons where we're sort of seeing that, in a way, China is kind of using this diplomatic language and saying that it's on the fence, sitting on the fence. But if it's sitting on the fence, it's definitely leaning much more towards China.
Right, and of course, Beijing must be watching this very closely, everything that's happening. What do you think are some of their takeaways?
Well, I think they're going to find it a bit disturbing on some levels. I think, first of all, there's a big question mark about how much they knew in advance about the invasion. And presuming that at the opening of the Winter Olympics, Putin did mention something, which, there's some evidence that it may have happened. But I think they were expecting a short invasion and successful invasion. And I think they were expecting the West not to get its act together and to come out with the kind of sanctions that it has. So I think the combination of these two things has led to, I think they won't like what they've seen. And Wang Yi, the foreign minister who we've seen talking today, has given us a pretty good view now of what the Chinese stance is on the Russian invasion. Maybe we can look at the quote.
The China-Russia relationship is grounded in the clear logic of history and driven by strong internal dynamics. And the friendship between Chinese and Russian peoples is rock solid. There's a bright prospect for cooperation.
So you can see from that sort of language there that clearly they are, there's no ambiguity now. I think that they have thrown their weight behind Russia. There's the constant talking about what the US is doing, rather than focusing on the invasion. So I think we have a lot more clarity now about where China stands.
Now, I think everyone is making this comparison, but how does this situation in Ukraine inform what might happen in Taiwan?
This is a big fear, and obviously it's a big fear in Taiwan. In the run-up, apparently there's people in the streets in Taiwan saying today Ukraine, tomorrow Taiwan. There's obviously a lot of fear. And the constant references to sovereignty have also caused alarm bells in Taiwan. I think that, and the leadership there has tried to keep things calm. I think they're very different militarily seen. I think it's much harder to invade an island where you have to cross the sea rather than a land invasion. And even the land invasion, as we're seeing in the Ukraine, isn't happening at the kind of speed that they were expecting. It's no longer a blitzkrieg. It's actually now more of a slow war of attrition almost.
There are a lot more mountains in Taiwan.
Exactly. And also, it's, the thing is that if Russia isn't going to occupy Ukraine, but presumably China would take Taiwan to keep it. And if you keep it against the wishes of the people, it's extremely difficult. So while I think there's obviously understandable fear, and we never know how things are going to turn out, but I think that the fact that they're different, also the fact that this is a very big year for Xi Jinping, it's the year in which he's going to be establishing himself as leader for life. So I think that probably in terms of an immediate threat of invasion, I don't think it's there. But there's always the suspicion that they could be dividing the two, that looking more at sort of dividing attention of the US, perhaps. That's always a risk. But if I had to make a call, I would say I don't think there's going to be an invasion immediately.
Very, very quickly, neighbors, South China Sea, they're getting nervous with this when they look at all this?
I think similarly to Taiwan, they're getting there's similar activity, similar reaction there, that there's nerves, I think, about the way this is playing out because of China's ambitions in the South China Sea.
Clifford, thank you so much, as always. And sticking to the topic of Taiwan, the war in Europe has certainly caught the attention of people there. For decades, they have lived with the possibility that Beijing might capture the independent island, which is completely self-governed and one of the world's 20 largest economies. Here's DW's Joyce Lee with more.
This car park is designated to be an air raid shelter in the event of an emergency. Amid the Russia-Ukraine war, the Taiwanese government has instructed local police to check all underground spaces. There are more than 100,000 bomb shelters in Taiwan, more than enough to house all its 24 million people. The authorities recently added a new mobile app feature to help people locate the closest site.
Because of the Ukraine crisis, more people have watched the promo video of our app. It shows that Taiwanese people are concerned about where they can find shelter.
Many in Taiwan see parallels with Ukraine. China has not ruled out the use of force to, quote, reunify with the self-ruled island. And for the past 2 years, Beijing has been sending warplanes to Taiwan's air defense zone on a daily basis. Taiwan has been under Beijing's threat for 7 decades, so it's become a part of daily life, and people even joke about having a war, just like the Ukrainians did before the invasion. So what happened in Ukraine is a wake-up call for the Taiwanese. Many see a need for greater self-reliance. As soon as the war broke out, Ukrainians in Taiwan were joined by locals in anti-war rallies.
The mindset of Putin and Xi Jinping are unfortunately very similar. If Putin can invade Ukraine just like this, without any reason, because there is no reason, then of course Taiwanese people should also be alert.
We're kind of afraid there will be a same situation happens in Taiwan. We will never know if we wake up and the older aircraft, Chinese aircraft, fell out of the sky of Taipei.
Despite the worries, experts say a cross-strait war is unlikely for now. It's too risky for Beijing to launch a landing operation given the anti-ship missiles Taiwan has. President Xi Jinping also prioritizes internal stability ahead of a Congress later this year, in which he's expected to take a historic third term as party chief. Nonetheless, Taiwan's defense ministry is on high alert. There are calls for an increase in defense spending.
Take Israel and Singapore, for example. Their defense spending accounts for more than 5% of their GDP. Taiwan should raise it to at least 3%. If we invest more in our military, it shows our determination to defend ourselves. In turn, our allies will be more willing to help us.
Last week, U.S. President Joe Biden sent a delegation of former top security officials to Taiwan as a show of support to the island. Beijing reacted furiously, with state media calling it an obvious provocation. On the Taiwan side, analysts said morale has been boosted significantly, adding that the Taiwanese must be on alert but not panic amid the rising tension.
China is setting a trap. They try to make Taiwanese people tense all the time, so we get tired and numbed. Then they can seize opportunities to launch surprise attacks.
Keep calm and carry on. Taiwanese people have been doing this for 70 years, and they're not going to change this mentality for the time being.